Hello, here we are once again, Robert Vaughn and Alex Jewell with the DeFi Collective, and we have some great information for you today. Today, we're going to be talking about the metaverse, and we're going to be talking about social tokens. A lot of people, I asked 10 people, 5 knew what social tokens were, and 1 knew what the metaverse was, and I had to kind of cut him off because he was talking to me for like a half hour. So, which tells me that
people were excited about it. Yeah,
I know he was, and it's funny, the people that know about the metaverse really like it, and once again, this is the DeFi Collective, Alex Jewell and Robert Vaughn, and we might as well kick it off now, so the metaverse, what is the metaverse? We could get very technical, and Alex could get more technical than I could, but in, everyday language, the metaverse is a virtual world. It's initially, it had to do with the world of gaming, but initially the internet was a lot of games. I know a friend of mine back in the 80s said, "Hey, look, we can play Pong over the internet." He said, "How cool is that?" I said, "Man, we used to spend hours, playing Pong over the internet." It's advanced a little bit since then, from Pong to and a lot of times with technology progresses in a lot of little increments, and then all of a sudden, like something will really change. Like for instance, with the first cell phone I had, I weighed 5 pounds, and it was a black case, and it had so much radiation, you had to put the case in the trunk of the car and have an extension cord because it would give you cancer. That's how it was. And now, we've everybody has small smartphones that have the computing power of is more powerful than the first computer that sent a rocket to the moon.
Although they do seem to be getting bigger again.
yeah. They do seem to be getting bigger because they got so small you can't see them. So and the internet along the way, things kind of build on things. Like the the MP3, the digital music kind of built on the internet. And then, digital music kind of killed the CD business, and they say, well, if we can do digital music, what else can we do digitally? And so, your phone now, you can stand outside and press a few buttons and order a taxi or, whatever. You can communicate with somebody. I got a call from somebody yesterday, in South Africa, and he's telling me about this new commodity token that 3 of the countries are getting together doing. And we're going to talk about social tokens too. It's going to be backed by lithium and gold and diamond mines. I said, wow, that's a great idea. But the fact that he could just, come home from work and pick up his phone and call me, I don't know, 15,000 miles away. And, we kind of talk like, like we're sitting in the next room. It's really, really, really amazing. And coming from a person who, I remember phones when you put a dime in the phone. That's how far back I go. A lot of you don't have, but you used to have to carry dimes. So if you wanted to make a call, you could stop at a payphone and put.
Or we upgraded to quarters, huh?
Yeah, and went up to a quarter. Everybody's like, "Oh my God!"
Inflation.
Now we pay $200 a month for a smartphone, and nobody complains. Yeah. So, but the metaverse, think of it as a virtual world. And there's some platforms that already exist. There's Decentraland. There's one called Somnium Space. There's one called Super World and Crypto Voxels. Now, a lot of these are used for gaming, but like I said about the internet started out as something to play with at first too, and we see where it is now. And this is sort of the next iteration. It's not really of the internet; it's kind of step beyond the internet, because one thing is virtual, and then it's a whole different world. Because in the metaverse, you can buy and sell virtual property. And you might say, well, that doesn't really exist. And that just doesn't make any sense. Well, neither does professional wrestling until you look at Big McMahon's bank account with about $2 billion in it. It starts to make a whole lot of sense,
Yeah.
So, you can buy land and in the virtual world. In the metaverse, you can buy land, you can buy buildings, you can buy cars. And you might say, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But in Decentraland, they have their own token. It's called Mana. and you can trade mana for dollars. So you can transact business in the metaverse with Decentraland, and you can say, you know, I have this character that I developed, and he's a character that fights in Grand Theft Auto 2, and you can take him to other games, and this is what he does, and he's so great, and I'll sell it to you for 50 mana, you know. And somebody say, oh, okay, that's a great deal, I'll take it. So you give him the character, you take the mana, and you turn it in for dollars. So you made some money, you know.
Right.
So you can buy land, you can buy virtual versions of real places. You can buy art, you know, NFTs exist in the metaverse. You know, everybody's talking about, you know, so-and-so makes 63 million on NFTs. Well, I tell you, you know, when you get to 7, 8, 9 digits, it's not a joke anymore, you know.
Right.
And I think, you know, this is sort of the next step. You know, the internet at first didn't have a lot of utility. It was more something to play with, you know, and now it has all kinds of utility. As a matter of fact, I don't even think our society could exist in the same way it does, you know, without the utility, you know.
Right.
I mean, just something simple like navigation, you know, on your phone. I remember when maps, your car, you had maps, you know, in a glove box. You had a glove box full of maps, you know, and said, oh, I'm in Kansas. I got to get a map for Topeka, Kansas, you know, and you go get a map for a quarter and say, okay, this is where we go, you know. So I think the metaverse, as we move forward, will have a lot more utility. And I'm going to ask Alex to talk about some of that utility, or kind of like, where do you see this going, and where could it go?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's one of the fundamental concerns people have, is you hinted at it, is like, what makes virtual land or property valuable? And the reality is that even older generations fully understand the value of cultural significance, because, you know, you go to an arcade in the 80s, you put money in for a game. I mean, like, what are you getting out of that, right? It's experiential. Maybe somebody made it. And, you know, there's people have been spending money on virtualizations of things for as long as humans have made art or made anything, right? It's just difficult to bridge that generational gap when what those virtualizations are changes, right? It's a little bit difficult for other generations. Even at my age, I have trouble understanding the things that Gen Z is probably spending money on in virtually online. I don't understand it. I'm not buying land in Decentraland, but hey, I mean, if there's like cultural significance there, if there's something that they are enjoying with it and it's creating money, that's just as fundamental as any other virtualization of money, where the value is not necessarily in some super measurable metric, you know, or measurable outcome, but because people like it, it has value, right? Just like music or art or anything else. And so what's interesting about the metaverse, though, because obviously virtualization of value and cultural significance, giving value, these things aren't new at all to human beings. What is new is the idea of, especially online, the idea of you owning all of it. So I remember when I was younger, my parents at some point made me delete my MySpace. And when I had to delete my MySpace, this is a
Perish
really
the
big
thought,
deal.
man. Perish the thought. You know?
I know, it was it was extremely difficult for me to deal with, because so much of my life revolved around MySpace. I mean, all of my pictures, I would like style my profile. It's how I learned how to code, really, was because of MySpace. And I had gotten a bad grade, and like they decided that I had to delete my MySpace in order to get better grades later. I don't know. It sounds silly now saying it, but this was what happened to me. This is a real thing that I would experience. But after I deleted my MySpace, I can't go back now. I can't retrieve my last photo, my photos from there. I can't retrieve anything that was on this profile. And this is a fundamental issue online, right? You lose your login information. As a website goes down, you can't even get to old MySpace profiles, even if you had one, because it's been bought and sold so many times and rebuilt. You know, you get a new phone, and sometimes not everything transfers over, or, you know, like there's all these situations where centralized sources of things that you feel like you own disappear because you don't actually own them. they disappear because you weren't able for some reason to move them to some other new centralized location that you're going to trust more than whatever the old place was. Or a lot of times we don't lose things because of redundancy. We have 6 different copies of the same picture in text messages and on the phone and on the computer, because if one of them goes out, we still have the picture somewhere else, right? And that's
and then we print out a copy just in case.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our lives right now are creating redundancy or just losing things that are valuable because we have had to trust centralized places for what's valuable to us virtually. What the metaverse is distinct in a distinct difference from a centralized internet, the old internet, Web 1 or Web 2 versus what we have now with decentralized Web 3, is the metaverse is completely decentralized from some central vulnerable point. So I can pick up things from one game and carry them somewhere else. My art collection is never going anywhere because it's not stored in a place where it can disappear. You know, when I own NFTs, my NFTs are on the blockchain. They're decentralized and associated with me, regardless of OpenSea or Rarible or whatever marketplace you can see it on. And so this is really powerful. This is a very powerful concept. Imagine you're in a virtual reality space and you want to display some art, or you want to have a certain item that they show off a certain item that you got in another game. Those items, those aspects of your virtual world, of the metaverse, are independent of where you got them or where you sold them, or they're independent items. And this is the power of the metaverse, is that you can have a virtual life, just like in real life, where the clothes you wear and the art you have and the way that you express yourself and your writings and everything that you can imagine that defines your digital life, all of those things can be associated with you in a decentralized way where you don't have to rely on centralized places to keep that safe.
That's right. And I think, you know, one thing about the metaverse is, you know, people say, well, it's just a virtual world. But to some people, that's very real. You know, you could say that an actress or an actor, they do things in sort of a virtual world. It's not really real.
Exactly.
But I've seen, you know, Tyler Perry soundstage, and it's pretty big. It's pretty impressive. And you would think you were in a real world, although it's not a real world, you know. So I think, you know, the thing that gives a virtual world value, I think, is that there's no limit to what you can do there. You know, this is relatively new. You know, we're talking about, you know, buying and selling different characters. There's real estate. People can buy virtual real estate. You know, you can have art that exists in the metaverse. You have NFTs, you know, people are making millions of dollars off those. But I think a lot of the utility of the metaverse, we probably haven't even scratched the surface of yet.
Right.
You know,
a lot of opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, you know, you're going to have, I think, eventually a sort of a coming together of the virtual world and the real world, where you do now actually, anytime you can make money, that's sort of a coming together. You know, that's a transference of value from the metaverse, you know, to the real world. But you may have, you know, other things there too that might be of value. You know, like you know, we talked about, you know, what my first concert was the Stones at the Akron Rubber Bowl, and Stevie Wonder opened for them. I mean, how much would that be worth in the metaverse?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
A copy of that. I don't know if one ever exists anywhere, but you know, I think a lot of things, and not just, you know, with music, but I think a lot of applications might work better in a virtual world. A virtual world is a 3D world. Now, suppose Alex comes up with maybe not an algorithm, but a new something new mathematically that you have to compute in 3D.
Or you
Sounds
can
a little weird.
if you do it in 3D,
Sounds a little
right?
weird, but suppose he develops some 3D formulas where things that used to take you, a half a week to do, you can do now in 3 seconds.
Yeah. Because we're moving towards blurring the line of digital and physical, right? I
Right.
mean, now you have surgeons who can pre-perform a surgery using Oculus Rift or some virtual reality. They can actually like break apart the 3D scans of a patient. They can see exactly where the issue is on the patient, and they can like figure everything out before they even cut the patient open. And I mean, when you think about life in that way, of like when I'm learning math, for example, and I can stand in front of a chalkboard next to a professor who's 1,000 miles away and have a really like seemingly physical experience of figuring out that math problem, or even like floating things and dragging them in, and all the like having the haptics with like different wearables, that connectivity to a virtual world makes it in some ways, I'd argue, more real. Because, imagine like our conversation right now, where this is a very virtual feeling conversation. We still connect, we still have like a great conversation, but imagine if like we were sitting at a table, felt like we're at the same table, and that was, and then everybody who watched us was in the same room.
We've done a lot of business at this table. I mean,
Right.
a lot of things have happened because we sat at this table.
Right.
Think about the other people that's impacted.
Mhm.
And, the money that's changed hands, more of it went out than went in sometimes, but so it does have, I guess that's a good example of, of something virtually that has an impact in the real world,
Yeah.
but it's 2-dimensional.
Right.
Now let your brain go to 3 dimensions, and that adds a whole different dimension, a whole extra
Right.
dimension to what you could do.
Yeah.
Not just from the point of mathematics and algorithms, but visually, you could conduct a business in 3 dimensions with several people on different planets.
You have Twitch streamers now. There's Twitch streamers that already
Mhm.
they can change form. I mean, it's crazy. They have entire virtual realities that they stream in. They can show art. They can move things around. They can change their physical form to entirely new, not just clothing, but like beings that like are still them, but they can interact differently with their audience. And it creates like a really enriching world of like, how do you interact with ideas and how do you interact with people? It sounds crazy, but this stuff this is how it's progressing. It's progressing from this very 2-dimensional engagement with the virtual world to obviously the 3-dimensional one we're talking about, to an integrated way for that to work, where you have actual brain interfacing and things like that are, I mean, the reality is they're coming. Like they're not going to stop developing it because some people don't like it. Like that's where this is headed.
It doesn't matter. I talked to someone and said, "Oh, that stuff is crazy, man. Nobody's gonna believe that, And it doesn't matter if you like it, don't like it, understand it, don't understand it. It's not just coming; it's here.
It's a law. It's not even a theory. Moore's law says it's going to happen. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's happening now, just that, in a small way. And I'm sure there's some people who are really into it that are probably working on things that we have no knowledge of right now. But anytime you introduce another dimension, I mean, things that exist in 2 dimensions. And if you think about it in the physical realm, is height and width. That's 2 dimensions.
Yeah.
Now, once you integrate another dimension, length, then instead of the XY, you have XYZ. So you have something that's not just existing on a flat plane, but it actually has form. And once it has form, then it has function, it has different functionality. You can't play 2-dimensional basketball, but you blow the ball up and it's not flat anymore, then it's a different story. So I think in 3 dimensions, with the metaverse, it's gonna open up things. It's gonna open up things in the financial world,
right?
That I don't know. I wouldn't want to be a bank owner right now, because there are going to be situations once algorithms get written, and smart contracts, I'm sure is going to have a place in the metaverse. You may not even need a bank.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah.
No, you don't need a
You really
bank.
don't.
You could keep
Yeah,
your money.
there's
You
no
can keep
banker
your
in
value.
Decentraland.
Yeah,
You
not
don't
your
have to get a
money.
bankers in Decentraland. No banker has to approve. Like, you don't have to give them all of your financial information and have it go through this convoluted process of deciding if you have
Right.
enough money to buy property. If you have it, it gets verified, it gets approved. You have it now. That's it.
Pretty
Somebody
simple,
else has
yeah.
your money. You have something that you bought.
Yeah, it's pretty simple, and it happens instantaneously. It's like, and when like with Decentraland, the mana is their token. I'm not sure what mana is going for now, in reference to the dollar, but this gentleman I talked to from South Africa said they want to do business in social tokens,
Mhm.
that everyone will accept, other than Bitcoin. And he said, "What do you think?" I said, "How about Cardano?" But I mean, there, and you could, theoretically create a new token that has, a commodity token that's backed by an asset that you just want to use for your own purposes. But it has value, and the thing about commodity tokens is, if it's say if it's a die is based on $1, so a die's value is always $1.
Mhm.
No matter what happens, it's always $1. So that's a crypto token that you could, a social token, cryptocurrency that you can buy things with. Like Alex's hat cost $40. Okay, here's 40 die. I'll transfer it over.
Yeah,
there's no
stable
banking.
coins now are pegged to the dollar. But what happens once the dollar is no longer stable, or once the dollar disappears? Well,
Yeah.
you can easily start pegging them to other things, right?
Probably
And that's
Bitcoin.
Probably, yeah, right, exactly.
Probably
So
Bitcoin. Yeah.
you'll probably start pegging them towards scarce crypto assets like Bitcoin, as opposed to using Bitcoin as the currency.
Mhm.
You would use Bitcoin as the stabilizer. You would use it as the standardization.
Yeah, and where you store your value would be in Bitcoin.
Right.
Yeah. So the metaverse, this is the next step. We had the internet, and then we had, what made the internet functional was all the different software. Then first the internet guys got to be billionaires, and the software developers got to be billionaires. Now the data scientists or the data guys billionaires. So the metaverse is sort of the next generation or the next iteration of what happened on the internet and where the internet is going to. But this is going to be a whole different kind of internet.
Right.
Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's called Web3.
Web3, okay.
It's called Web3 because it is an entirely new concept of, well, it's a repurposing of certain concepts that have existed and haven't been executed well, right? And it's a repurposing of those concepts, just like any new technology is. Just like cryptocurrency and or ledger is really a repurposing of an idea of a certain tribe that had rocks that they kept ledgers on, and they would store the rocks in the ocean in between their islands. And I mean, these are real things that people have done in the past that, ancient people did. And we repurpose them with the internet gave us this way to decentralize it so we don't have to store rocks in the ocean. And
if you wanted to, it may not be such a bad deal.
It really, I guess that's a form of cold storage, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's, with the new internet, we have to think slightly differently about, where things are and how we own them. And I do want to clarify too, in terms of social tokens, social tokens are really a tokenization of a person, on a digital person. So if I have like my Instagram handle is Best Food Alex, because I post like a lot of food, I could have like a Best Food Alex token that would be a representation of the value that my followers decide that I have. Okay. So it's almost like a tokenization of your clout. Okay. Not that that's a great word, but it's a tokenization of the value you bring to an audience or that you bring to a certain digital environment.
Mhm.
And so social tokens can be used for a variety of things, right? Negative things are like if centralized entities start trying to use those as some form of credit score or something, like that Black Mirror episode where people can like score each other and then like you can only live in a certain place if you have like a high social score. Like we would like to avoid that dystopian future.
Yeah.
Because obviously, countries like China have implemented things like this that are obviously very dangerous because they start marginalizing people that just don't fit the idea of what a perfect society should look like. But there's really positive ways that can be used, because you think about all these creators now, these independent creators, some of them are, pretty young even. They have entire audiences that love them, but they're victims. I guess I could call it victimhood to some of these social media platforms that will randomly ban their content, randomly take their stuff down. Their account will get like shut down and they don't know why. They can't reach out to a contact support person. Like that's really bad, because let's say somebody's livelihood is built on them being able to produce content that they get paid for, and then all of a sudden their account gets shut down and they don't know why and they can't do anything about it. That's a very difficult thing. And so imagine having a social token that maintains a market cap for that social token. You get paid for having your audience. And guess what? You don't need YouTube in the middle deciding arbitrarily that you can't have that audience or that you can't do anything because it doesn't fit what they're trying to push on their, on their mainstream. So by taking some of that centralized power away from these very large technology companies that have profited greatly from not their own idea, but from the creators and the audiences on the platform, without the creators and without the audience, YouTube's worthless, right? Right. So they're the people who should be getting paid the most, right? By creating good interactions in the comments, your audience can get compensated, and for creating content that creates that compensation and creates that ecosystem, creators should be compensated. And YouTube doesn't need to be a part of that situation, right?
Oh, not really. Yeah. And social tokens, I guess, can best be described as a brand of crypto for creators and others to build sustainable, independent economies. And this was sort of something I put together. I looked it up on about 10 different sites, and when you look up what is a social token, you get so many different things that it is. But I think this is what it basically comes down to. To build sustainable, independent economies where fans can buy and use the tokens for access to exclusive content. Alex plays guitar. The only way you can get a song is you have to have an Alex token. If you get an Alex token, they're worth $7 now. But if I were you, I'd buy some and give them to friends at Christmas, because when his new album comes out, they're going to be worth $75. Exclusive content, private communities, backstage assets. Do you have a Beyonce token? They're like 800 grand, but with the Beyonce token, you can go to you get flown to any concert free, and you get to hang out with her all weekend. Right. I would imagine some people that'd be worth 800 grand. Right. So that token has value, and then you may have somebody that says, well, you know what, I want to get one for $1 million. Well, you just made 200 grand. Tickets and merchandise. Basically 3 types: utility, commodity, security. Utility was the one Alex described, that has use or has value within the use of a system. You know what I'm saying? Like, Alex tokens. If you're 2 Alex tokens and you can get a cheeseburger at Chuck E. Cheese or something, Chuck E. Cheese tokens are like social tokens. Yeah. They're like utility tokens. You know what I'm saying? That right. You can use, has value within the use of the Chuck E. Cheese system. Right. It's contextual. Now, if you, come to buy something from me and you say, I got 14 Chuck E. Cheese tokens, I'm going to say, okay, and what else you got? Because they're non-fungible tokens that are only good at Chuck E. Cheese. So that's a good example of tokens.
They're probably semi-fungible, I guess.
Yeah, semi-fungible. Yeah. It's like when, the amusement park, when, I was a kid, this amusement park, I used to go to in Detroit called Belle Isle. They had these tokens, in Belle Isle, you get, 3 tokens, you can ride this, 2 tokens, you can ride that, 1 token, you can buy. So they had a lot of value there, but once you went away from there, they had no value. Commodity tokens, and this is the one the gentleman from South Africa was speaking about, token backed by a standard asset that already has an independent value, such as we talked about the DAI token, which is a cryptocurrency that's pegged to the dollar.
Yep.
1 DAI equals $1. You say, well, what's the purpose of having a DAI? Well, if you want to trade with other cryptocurrencies, maybe a DAI might be more convenient. And if you, make $180 million in the crypto market, maybe you want to keep it in DAI. So Alex and I don't call you and start asking for money, nobody will know,
Right.
They standard asset based on a standard asset that already has value, such as gold, oil, or dollars, or some sort of sovereign currency. China has a currency that's pegged to their currency. They want a cryptocurrency that's pegged to the Chinese. Is it the yen?
Yep.
Okay, this is pegged to the yen, which it gives their currency. They see the dollar going down like this, so they say, hey, maybe we'll do this, and we can get the crypto. We can make the yen, because the dollar is a standard of value. You can go to 50 different countries, and you don't have to speak a word, and they don't have to speak a word of English. You don't speak a word of their country, but you pull out a $20 bill. And all of a sudden, there's a big smile comes on everybody's face, because everybody wants dollars. It's the standard of value worldwide.
When I take ruples down to the restaurant on the corner, they never want them.
And you go
crazy.
sometimes, when you spend dollars, things are a lot cheaper than they would be, normally. Even from the exchange rate, they can be even cheaper from the exchange rate, because people want dollars, because that's a good way to store value. Dollars and Bitcoin, is a good way to store your money. This gentleman in Africa, they're the 3 countries that are getting together an independent token that's going to be pegged to lithium. I think he said diamonds and gold.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some mine owners who have lithium, diamonds, and gold mine that want to have a token that's pegged to that. Well, you could say, well, that's probably a pretty good deal, because as the price of lithium goes up, gold is pretty stable. I don't think the price on diamonds ever went down in history. So you got to say that's pretty good. The only thing you got to worry about is if you run out of lithium, but which you probably won't, anytime soon. And then as it becomes more scarce, the token will be worth more.
Right. If they run out of lithium, it'll probably actually go up.
Yeah, it'll probably go up. Yeah.
Because we still desperately need it for batteries. We haven't figured there aren't
Yeah.
great other options yet.
Yeah,
So.
and then the other kind of social token is a security token. Say tokens that equate to ownership in a company or a decentralized autonomous organization, a DAO. And this may be the new direction of the market. Everybody says, well, if we didn't have a stock and bond market, we didn't have a stock market, what would we do? What would we do? How would you store your money? How could you make money on your money? Well, if a security token, the valuation is easier to state and maintain a valuation if it's based on a company or a DAO. If you had I think this is what Facebook is trying to do with the Lira. They're trying to have that token based on the value of Facebook, which it's like a pretty good deal. But if the government steps in and breaks Facebook up, then it's probably not such a good deal, because it probably won't be worth as much, because Facebook won't be the same company.
Right.
But if it's a company or a decentralized DAO, you can, this might be the new direction of the market. This might be a new investment tool, investment instrument for the market, because the valuation is pretty straightforward. If you got a company that makes, $1 million a year, and the company's usually sells for 14 times annual earnings, it's probably worth $14 million. They got 14 coins, and each one's worth $1 million. It's pretty simple. So if you take that to, a broker and say, hey, I want to buy $1 million, worth of General Motors stock. He said, what do you got? I got one Alex token. It's worth $1 million. Okay, sure, we'll take it. Because they figure that the token is probably going to do good. Examples of social tokens: Cardano, Bitcoin, Sushi Swap, Solana, Ethereum, Binance Coin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think crypto token is a type of cryptocurrency is a type of social token. Could you speak a little bit on that, Alex? And maybe talk about how they're one and the same, but maybe they're not.
Yeah, I mean, well, the underlying idea of how all of these cryptocurrencies work, any decentralized form of currency, is that they are valuable based on our context for them. And this is sort of the power of cryptocurrency, because especially now that we're adding protocols into the mix where you can, like ERC20, for example, you can have Ethereum get converted immediately into USDC, a stable coin, and it's fluid, it's the same network. And so once you start establishing these protocols, you can have extremely contextual tokens. And those tokens can be standardized on a variety of really important contextual stuff. I think earlier on in our, probably months ago, I talked about a farming token. Imagine that you're a farmer and you are tokenizing, let's say you have a bunch of AI constantly learning about your farming system. Okay, your whole farming system has been digitized. You have a bunch of sensors on everything, and it's digitizing the entire farming operation you have. And it's learning from that information how to constantly improve all the logistics of that system. Okay,
which, by the way, is going on now.
Right, that's what Amazon, that's Amazon is a logistics company at this point, right? That's what Amazon does. And so let's say you have this data that's constantly being stored, and that data is constantly learning about the system, and it's always improving upon itself. Now, let's say you have a contextual farming token that is standardized by that data. Well, now you standardize the token by something that theoretically is always improving, right? You're always improving your knowledge of the system. The system's always improving by way of the AI learning about itself. And then you are tokenizing that into a currency that can be used within the system and then easily transferable to any other context. So let's say I need to make an exchange I need to buy feed or something for my farm, or I need equipment. Okay. Well, now that we have protocols, we can easily transfer these digital currencies between each other immediately in a very liquid fashion. Well, that's not a big deal. We can easily convert that through a protocol. We can swap it. I can end up with whatever I needed. They could, or even currency for whatever system that is. They can end up with my currency if they want it, or we can use some liquidity pool that provides whatever currency they're looking for. We can always swap those things as long as there's demand within the system for those currencies, and there's a decentralized protocol that allows us to do it. And those currencies are also built in a really brilliantly designed way for the system that they're relevant to.
Okay. All right. One of the things, this is not to sidetrack too much, but this is relevant to what we're talking about. There are not a lot of, I guess in economics, there are not a lot of rules and not a lot of data that exists when dealing with cryptocurrency. So I was talking to one guy knows the economist. I talked to another gentleman who's into crypto. And they said, well, crypto economics is what people will have to be proficient in terms of learning, what the value of a token is. And I guess there are a couple of algorithms and a couple of theorems now of how to determine the value of a token. I'll just tell you about one. It's called MV equals PT. The number of tokens times the number of times, the number of tokens multiplied by the number of times the coin changes hands per day equals the price of goods and services daily. And that's basically how you get the value of the token. You know, excuse me, equals the price of goods and services times the daily transaction volume.
Like
So
velocity, it's like velocity of, because it circulate, it's how much it circulates, right? It's
yes,
the
how much it
circulating,
circulates and how many times it changes hands,
right?
you know, determines the value. And then there's another one. And these are just theories. They haven't really been tested out, time tested, because this is sort of a new branch of economics, you know.
Right.
Everybody's trying to figure it out, you know. This is one it's called MC equals TH. And it says the market cap equals the value of daily goods and transactions times the average holding period.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of flips it around. It's not the transaction daily volume, but it's the average holding period.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like how many purchases are made and how many transactions, dollar volume of transaction and purchases are made in reference to how long people are holding these coins. You know, I mean, do they get them and they spend them right away? You know, or do they kind of hold them for a month, you know, and then spend them, which, you know, if you hold them for a month and spend them, then you're probably going to have a lower market cap, you know, so the faster they get spent, the higher the market cap. And so this is one way that economists have been using now to try to place some sort of value on coins. But I think, you know, it's kind of funny because, you know, we always talk about how capitalism is changing. And I think the value of these coins is really going to be based on free market capitalism, supply and demand.
Yeah,
That's what you see with Bitcoin. There's a limited supply. More people want it, the price goes up. So it's kind of like the old becomes new again, so to speak, you know.
when you think about them in US dollar value, sure. I mean, when you think about the price of Bitcoin in US dollar value, because that's how we still peg our thinking. I still peg my thinking to US dollar a lot because I pay my rent in US dollars. I buy food in US dollars most of the time. You know, I'm at least paying for my Netflix and my Spotify of crypto now. But you know, a lot of obviously our world, our existing American economy, even though a lot of the logistics and things behind the scenes are happening on the blockchain, we still think about things in terms of free market capitalism with the US dollar, right? We still look at fluctuations in US dollar price of Bitcoin to determine arbitrarily if it's working. Like, are they getting it? Are people caring about it, right? And the reality is that 50 years from now, we're not going to have the US dollar, at least in this form, to peg things against or care about it. The contextual value of something, and that's why they have these equations of money. I think they're called like equations of money, of like what makes something money. And you have people like Fisher, who, you know, they're economists who have come up with these equations to try to figure it out, to try to turn the theory of money, of how we value things, into an equation that can be reproducible and testable and observable and all these things. And you have people who have gone even more complex, who can fill up a whole chalkboard with the circulate, you know, these two equations you mentioned of circulation versus volume, together with you know, certain equations of like how it's used, of where it's used, of what it's pegged against, of, you know, there's all these different parts of the equation that people can start throwing in variables for, determine like, what is this component that's cultural, right? How do we define this cultural component, like we've talked about before, of like what makes currency valuable? And in every sense of currency that we've ever had, it's really just been the fact that people use it. You know, like I joked, if I took some random country's currency to a restaurant on the corner, that currency doesn't mean anything to the restaurant on the corner. The only reason the US dollar is even remotely useful in other countries is because of imperialism. You know, it's not because like the US dollar should be valuable there. But again, it's sort of this immeasurable component to the equation that mathematicians and economists will always try to fit into numbers because that's their job, right? And what I enjoy about economics, and I think what modern economics tries to look at, is that human component. I mean, you look at some modern economists like the guys who wrote Freakonomics, for example, they don't really mention equations at all in Freakonomics. They mention the human elements of our changes and our assumptions. And I think what crypto and blockchain come down to is challenging those assumptions, right? Challenging our assumptions about what money is, about what makes something valuable. And, I have to do that with myself all the time. Like we've talked about here too, also is like, as younger generations think differently about the metaverse, and they think differently about what's valuable to them. And they spend, half the day watching 15-second video after 15-second video after 15-second video. It's like easy to make fun of that.
Yeah.
And it's fun to make fun of that, but you also have to understand, like, this is an entire generation of people who are going to think and act and behave and create a completely different society than we
and a
did.
lot of them don't see that big a difference between the metaverse and the universe.
Right. Yeah.
And I think as kids, these virtual reality glasses, I mean, all the kids have them, the ones that can afford them.
Right.
I mean, I don't know how much they cost, and probably not cheap, but all the kids have them.
Yep.
And I know an architect, he uses one where he shows people around buildings from around the world. They have them and he has them, and they hook up and he takes them on a tour of the building. It's a 3D, with music and lighting, and, he does this big production. So, there's an example where something for gaming has, value in the real world. I guess the Army uses them too.
Yeah, everybody. I mean, like I said, surgeons, the imagination of younger generations is ultimately what forms the reality for the next one, right? And so our imaginations of, like, in TV shows and movies and books, we kind of imagine this very virtualization of life. And now these kids are doing it. And now surgeons and architects, and soon when you have the brain interfacing, blind people and deaf people creating these virtual experiences where they too can see things and hear things and be a much, have a much richer life experience. I mean, it's not just for fun. These things are revolutionizing industries, and they're also creating, they're helping people with disabilities who aren't, typical. And that's really cool to be able to, for somebody to put in a brain chip and be able to see. Amazing to put in a chip and be able to move their arms because of the software that's creating this three-dimensional
and the software
in the brain.
Yeah, the metaverse could have applications even in the medical field. With the advent. I mean, I read an article the other day about or pretty soon, if you break your arm, you have a compound fracture, instead of putting a rod in it, they'll just take some of your DNA and maybe just grow you a whole new bone.
Right.
And replace it.
Yeah.
It would be an exact, sort of like going to the auto body shop and getting a new, oxygen O2 sensor.
People are worried about the nanoparticles in the vaccine. Just wait until until you're swallowing a pill full of nanobots that are gonna, like, literally work microscopic level in your body in a specific place. I mean, it's a beautiful thing when you understand it scientifically, but there's always naturally going to be groups of people in society who are scared and they're terrified.
Well, I think a lot of that comes from the fact that we haven't done a real good job, particularly in this country, of educating the masses of people.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't, and you kind of really get a sense of it when you work with people from different countries. And one of my first jobs was a research assistant in a lighting research lab at GE. And GE used to get the best scientists from Russia, from France, from Germany, from Nigeria, from Africa, from Australia. They would get the best guys from all around the world. And they used to have a couple guys that, were just finished high school, would run circles around our master's engineers. Because, in research, the thing that usually separates the men from the boys is the ability to do higher level math.
Yeah.
Now we have computers to do that. So I think what's separating men from the boys now, or the women from the girls, is knowledge, and we haven't done a real good job of educating When somebody believes that a nanoparticle, can make you a magnet stick to your chest if you get a vaccine, well, they probably haven't taken biology, and they probably haven't taken physics. They probably haven't taken electrical engineering. They don't know much about nanoparticles.
Right.
And just to show you, just for an example, the scientists we have from Germany and the guys we have from Germany, the ones they get in high school, what we got, we get in the first 4 years of college, they would get in high school, the engineers, and they would, so by the time they got a master or PhD, they were at the upper echelon because they got a great basic education throughout high school. And graduate high school back then, if you wanted to go into an engineering program, you had to you had to work for an engineer for 2 years before you could apply to an engineering school, because they wanted to make sure that you were worthy of being a German engineer.
Yeah.
So it's we haven't done a real good job of educating. So I think that's where a lot of the focus has to be, on educating people.
Yeah.
Because someone is worried about a magnetic nanoparticle, the metaverse means absolutely nothing to them.
Right. I think that's the gap, right? The biggest gap in this country that results in a lot of our class, our economic gaps.
Gaps
access. It comes down to education.
It does. Yeah.
That's why even politicians, they know that education is the big defining factor. That's why they target groups based on education and how they define their social media advertising and things like that. And they know exactly how important education is in determining people's knowledge of the world, of economics, of technology and science, other STEM subjects.
Yeah. Because if you, if you're fortunate, economically fortunate, you can go to the better schools and you get a better education.
Yeah.
You can, you can get a straight 4.0 all throughout school to get in Harvard, have a top SAT score where you can donate 15 million bucks and get in. Along with your brothers and
sisters. If you're already rich, you could buy your way in. Yeah.
And if your rich parent went there, then you're in twice. You could bring somebody with you, I guess.
Right.
But
I pose for a fake rowing picture, right?
Yeah. But I think from a societal standpoint, when you don't educate the majority of the citizens, then you wind up with a citizenry that will believe a lot of things that have no basis in science.
Yeah, more vulnerable. Yeah.
I mean, global warming. That I have a neighbor says, "You don't believe in that crap, do you?" Say this is just a normal cycle. The fact that we had the warmest July on record, next July will be warm. It's just a normal cycle. So if he had taken some geology courses, and maybe some courses in chemistry, where he can understand the interaction, maybe he would believe in global warming.
Yeah. Or at least be educated enough. I think this is the key, is being educated enough to know who to trust, right? If you have two sources of information and one of those sources is somebody who spent 40 years making 80 grand a year to really care about the subject of environmentalism. They've never walked a red carpet. They've never been in a political office. They've dedicated 40 years of their life in some dark, cold corner of the world studying the ice caps, right? Or you have a politician who's like,
who got rich selling ivermectin.
Right. Which one are you going to choose, right? And having enough education to determine expertise of who to trust, to delegate your trust, I think that's the big thing. Because I don't know every subject, but I think what I'm really good at is knowing who to trust on those subjects. And I think,
and you also, one thing I found invaluable was, and I think this is the most valuable part of higher education, is knowing how to do research.
Yeah.
I always, if you know how to do research, then you can find out there's information out there. And there's information in libraries that you won't find on the internet. Believe it or not, there's information in books. Every book in the Cleveland Public Library, which we have an awesome library, is now on the internet.
Yeah.
Internet's a good place to start, but there are, a lot of different places that you can get information from.
People have to read books. I know it's really hard with attention spans,
Yeah.
but it's so important to read books. I mean, I've recommended books on our show before of like, here's books on understanding economics, on understanding the fourth industrial revolution, on understanding what's happening. So you can see the value of what we're talking about, because you're not going to get it in a tweet.
No, you won't. My next book I want to read is Snow Crash.
I haven't read it, but it looks good.
Yeah, it's sort of how the metaverse whole thing came to be, and how it was conceptualized, and the 3D aspect of it and everything. So I want to read that so I can get, I think when you understand the background of something and how it came to be and sort of what the frame of reference was, then you can kind of understand, you can kind of understand where it could go. You kind of understand where it could go. So that's going to be my next one. Social tokens are here to stay. Like it or not, the metaverse is here to stay, like it or not. A lot of times we tend to think that we have more influence over our future than we actually do. And you do have influence up to a point. But if we ever get elected officials that understand the metaverse and social tokens, then I think we'll be well on our way to a better society.
Right.
Because they will understand.
We can control things in favor, right? We can direct things so that the change that we can't change doesn't become dystopian. And I think this is the critical point, right? We can't change Moore's law, which describes the progress of technology. That is, like I said, it's a law. Like, we're not changing the progress of technology, because every time you make one little step, well, the next step is easier, and the next one's easier. It's if one person decides, I'm done here, I'm not going to progress my research beyond this because I'm uncomfortable, another person will pick up where they left off.
That's right.
And so you have Moore's law is going to happen because of how the universe, the underlying nature of the universe. But what we can do is we can make sure that with our limited knowledge of that future, we can make sure that it happens in our favor. And I think that's where decentralization comes in. And I think that's where we get the most excited about actually having ownership over that decentralized world.
Reversal of ownership, back to the
theme, right?
Give me my data back. I want my data back.
How do we own that future, so that surgeons can exchange information, that that architects can exchange information, that we never lose our photos,
and we own it, so we don't have to buy it from somebody who's going to sell it to the highest bidder.
Right.
And I think that's what happens a lot of times, especially with medical care. If somebody asked me one day, said, do rich people live longer? I said, you bet they do. I said, because they get access to care that they won't even tell you about.
Right.
That's a fact. So Okay, well, we talked about the metaverse, about social tokens, and we also threw in our 2 cents about a few other things. But we hope you like the show. And again, our email address is the DeFi Collective @gmail.com. I'm Robert Vaughn. This is Alex Jewell. And until we meet again, which will be next week, have a great week.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.